Hey guys, it's me again. Welcome back to the DeFi Drop. So today's drop features Jon from Gauntlet, a powerhouse providing vaults with risk-adjusted DeFi yields for institutional capital at scale. Jon, it's so awesome to have you guys on. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, it's really excited to be here and excited to be helping contribute to the Portals team.
Man, of course. Well, we're so happy to have you guys. We've been big fans forever. And I hope we can get as much out of this podcast as possible for everyone listening. But look, to put it bluntly, right, Gauntlet is pretty unstoppable right now. 1.5 billion in TVL. Your mini app just recently went live on base. Your vaults are dropping left, right, and center. Gauntlet's long been known for its risk modeling across the DeFi ecosystem. Now you're bringing that expertise directly into vault strategies. So to kick off, for listeners new to Gauntlet Vaults, can you give us the high level overview of what you're building and why it matters?
Yeah, we'll definitely jump into what I'm building, what we're all building at Gauntlet, and kind of why I think it's important. Just real quick, just want to share that like anything I share on this is my opinion, not the opinion of the Gauntlet, not financial legal advice. These are all just educational entertainment, having a lot of fun. If you want to learn more about Gauntlet, check out Gauntlet XYZ. I'm really excited to be here, and but yeah, so diving into what Gauntlet is as you know the history of Gauntlet, we kind of started as probably the quantitative risk researchers in crypto back in 2018, founded by our brilliant co-founders John Morrow, Tarun Chitra, and Ray Chang. And from there, we kind of evolved in doing like DeFi lending, doing the risk management for a lot of DAOs, major institutions in crypto in the early days, and now we've entered curation. And why enter curation? A lot of people, when they think about Gauntlet, is they know us as like the people that understand a lot of the stuff that works in crypto. And always the question is like, why not? Why can't Gauntlet build their own non-custodial products to have people access for these opportunities? And that's kind of what vaults are now, and kind of where our meta, what we're trying to build towards, is like we're looking to build non-custodial yield opportunities that use Gauntlet risk management expertise and strategies to create really good opportunities for users to get a risk-adjusted yield in crypto. And so like that's kind of what we are, and like what we see all these different vaults popping up is we constantly have inbound saying, listen, we know we can get the best a really high yield, but we want like something risk adjusted we can offer our utility base and scale at some kind of like a high level. And that's kind of what we do nowadays at Gauntlet. So like that's a lot of our business arms nowadays. And that's why you see vaults popping up. We have multiple different visions, ranging from your staking to lending to perp strategies, and we're constantly just trying to produce what do we think the user base needs and wants, and how can we build something that like we can build that's sustainable and can scale in a safe manner for the users, and how do we create really good distribution for that, working with guys like Portals and other players to like build a product that we think their client base, their audience needs, and then designing it and like looking to actually scale it with them with them together. And that's kind of what Gauntlet is. 1.5 billion dollars. When I first started, I think we were sitting at 80 million, 100 million, and now we're just aggressively trying to grow and scale and make DeFi safer for as many users as possible via our expertise in risk management, product development, curation, and how else we do things.
Jon, epic intro. I think everyone gets the picture now.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, man. So going back to what you at the first half of what you said, so let's talk about risk adjusted yields, okay? And primarily risk adjusted yields versus chasing APY. Gauntlet offers risk optimized performance instead of simply chasing the highest APY. Can you walk us through how the optimization engine picks and rebalances positions across multiple protocols and maintains institutional grade stability while still outperforming most vaults?
So the kind of question is like first there's like what's the demand from the user audience, user base, and then how can we make it appetizing and sustainable? So like what's in demand right now is like we saw different products arise like Morpho, which gives what some of the best supply side yields in lending for the crypto at size. That we've seen delta neutral strategy scale such as Athena, Resolve, and other great projects like that. And how we think about it and how we build risk adjusted yield is we kind of saw a world where people are building vaults that leverage and do these things, but they're not properly rebalancing. They're not looking at like what these vaults are and what they're doing under the hood and how they're optimizing it, optimizing risk or return, or what they're doing. Say if it's Athena strategy, what's the looping, what's the optimized looping? Are they just max looping and like not managing the position under the hood? And so like kind of what we do is like versus getting high yield and chasing yield is we build like an optimized yield. An optimized yield basically looks at the risk profile to the yield of every different strategy we can deploy into, like a Morpho vault, like an Athena, a basis trade, and like we kind of basically evaluate what it looks like and how can we get exposure while making sure that we're not overly exposed, getting that like some kind of generating a yield for our users, while also, if a bad event happens or risk event happens, we don't accrue any kind of, ideally don't accrue any losses to our users. And so when you build like so people like build like aggregators that allocate into Morpho vaults, what are the Morpho vaults you're allocating to? And then what is the yield being earned on those Morpho vaults? Morpho vaults have very different risk profiles, and we kind of design our risk profiles by kind of 3 differentiating factors: prime, core, frontier. Frontier is the like most yield seeking, core more of a balanced, prime very conservative yield. So like when we're allocating to strategies, we kind of basically categorize via like, when we're talking about chasing yield versus getting optimized yield, integrating Gauntlet Alpha and the Portals.fi, we kind of talk about like trying to really integrate what is a balanced yield we can get to get maximum exposure while making sure that we can always like have liquidity to withdraw funds if we need to from that vault, and if any event ever happened, and what are the exposures of the underlying vault, the collaterals they're exposed to in that the markets are exposed to in that vault. And by looking at that and evaluating, we're able to like decide we can take this much exposure, always withdraw, and also still get the best yield we can get while making sure we're not just yield chasing and find ourselves in a situation where we're 100% allocated to something and we can't pull the money out. Sorry, users. And that's kind of how we design and build like an optimized yield versus chasing yield. A great example right now is we don't just do Morpho vaults on Gauntlet Alpha. We start allocating to various like PTs, such as the Athena PTs or RLP on Resolve and different assets here, where we basically put a percentage, a smaller allocation of those vaults to generate and to capture that yield opportunity, while making sure there's not too much exposure. We can't withdraw via the liquidity pools, and there's ample liquidity to like make an exit if we need to make sure our users are safe, and then also like still capture what we can. And that's what like an optimized yield is versus just strictly yield seeking or yield chasing. And that's kind of how we think about things. You can do a lot of different activities in DeFi, and doing it, you can do it at various scales and various sizes. And the goal is to make sure when you're getting that optimized yield, you're not overly exposed to one singular event, and you can make sure if something happens that is calculated or is probabilistic to happen, we're able to like exit and make sure we prioritize our depositors and their safety.
And of course, there's a sustainable side of it as well, right? Sustainable strategies goes beyond token incentives. So, I mean, we're going to move in that direction now, but much of DeFi yield is driven by token incentives. How does Gauntlet differentiate its strategies to deliver sustainable, real yield rather than relying on short-term emission?
Yeah, we all remember the DeFi 2020 meta. Spend a bunch of tokens and hope someone stays, and see what capital stays, and who's stuck holding the bag, and who are now apparently our users because they're stuck holding the bag. And so how we kind of view it is like, we view there's a portion of crypto that's still very much in demand of this. We also view as we rotate into a more mature or ecosystem, a more category of finance, more mature financial like ecosystem. We think there's going to be more of a demand for not just speculating on the upside of something that's kind of a fake yield, and focusing on real yield. And we think USD yield is like ideally probably the golden ticker that we're all trying to get. And that's kind of how we design it, is if we accrue tokens, you auto compound, you rebalance those, and you kind of like really focus on the USDC side yield versus like a random token that could adjust in value any given day. And so like we build like Gauntlet Alpha, and products like that, and what we're focusing on what gives us the best real yield in dollars, and not like a volatile yield in tokens based on its price action. And that's how we think is like, as users, become more mature in the space, we all kind of started where we started looking at these tokens, punting into them, and as you kind of mature in the space, you kind of focus more on the USDC side and what you can get in actual dollars. And like we think as society, as the ecosystem matures, dollar yield is the most important element, and that's what we want to make sure we're focused on, is kind of like really getting, what can we get these guys in USDC? And we think that's kind of like the future of where things are going, and that's what a lot of people are in demand for, I think, in the long enough term. It's cool to get a token. It's very much cool to get, dollars. And that's what we think. That's how we build like different products like Gauntlet Alpha, is we're focused on like yield on dollars. And we think that's what everyone's going to want in the long enough time frame as our ecosystem matures.
Yeah. You guys are, I mean, Gauntlet's bringing institutional discipline to DeFi, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's very much a focus of who we are.
And Gauntlet's risk models already help secure billions across DeFi. So this obviously leads to more vault expansion plans. Are you planning on launching similar quantitative vaults optimized for other assets like ETH or wrap BTC? And if so, what kind of strategies might power them?
Yeah, we're always thinking about these different things and what's the next like big product we can build to scale that can always like bring in both institutional and retail users to get an optimized yield. A lot of these strategies will revolve around lending, potentially some borrowing, capturing various like activities, such as cost to borrow BTC is or wrapped SDETH is cheaper. At this rate we can access this trade to like this yield strategy to like get like some kind of an ROI. Um, and like so when we start thinking about if we're going to build a WETH or a BTC or another version of these just like Gauntlet Alpha, I think our big focus is what is the demand for the yield of the current audiences we're trying to talk to? How much can we what can we actually sustainably get on that yield and what size and what's the demand tolerance for it? So if and what are the strategies we're going to employ to get that and what are the safety mechanisms on the strategy and what is like the risk management we can do to make sure that user funds are SAFU and do these various non-custodial strategies. So how we think about like, are we going to do a BTC or ETH? It really comes down to the market, what's in demand, and like how much size do they want. ETH is one of those really interesting products where I don't think yield is the biggest value prop of ETH. I think like if you look at like a lot of like yield bearing ETH products versus like Lido or all these different, it's more about trust in the system under the hood rather than what you're getting for a predictable return. And so or like at a predictable return of scale, is people are more comfortable getting like a 2.5 versus like getting a 5 if they don't know how much it can sustain itself. And so what I kind of think about with these products is also is like what are the audiences that like really wants and demands a product like this based on what we're talking about for a token. And so generally if we're ever going to deploy another strategy, it could do a lot of things. All of it's going to be very carefully considered and it's going to be really carefully thought out and how can we get it and what's the size we can get in that sustainably to get that that ROI that people are trying to like find in these yield strategies. And then like so like is there a plan for a new one? I don't know. But it's like also like here's how we're going to think about it. And if we do create something, what's the size? What are the strategies? How do we manage the risk? And who is our user base? USDIC, I think, and USD is just one of those easy ones to start with that I think is always going to be in demand. And then we got to see if there's something you can build that's in a lot of safety vehicles to do like another different kind of token.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is your process for identifying and rotating into these best risk-adjusted yields across these different platforms or chains is basically down to market conditions and where the demand is.
Yes, exactly.
That's it, right? So we're going to hop to security, all right? Security and risk. Since it's just been mentioned a bit, you've built a reputation for rigorous risk controls. How does Gauntlet manage liquidity, stablecoin, and smart contract risk within the vaults to maintain resilience under stress?
Yeah, I think Morpho is a great example of this. Every different collateral has a very different risk profile. There are blue chips like wrapped BTC, wrapped SDETH, maybe CBBTCs that have high liquidity. There are yield bearing stables. Some have adjustable strategies, some have non-adjustable strategies. There's maybe volatile tokens you could be thinking about as well. And like what we kind of do is when users deposit into these like non-custodial vaults like in Morpho, where we allocate only as much that can sufficiently be allocated to ensure there's still liquidity to make sure a safe liquidation goes through. When you take in like a different design like a yield bearing stable, market liquidity is one element to think about, but it's also the design of the oracle. Certain oracle designs are really efficient for certain different kinds of products, and it's really important to design like make sure the price is being reflecting what the true value of something is at all times and defining that clearly. And so, like, we basically, as you take in all these different kinds of potential yield-bearing opportunities, like in Athena, like Resolve, like another opportunity, like I just keep saying these because like they're very well trusted products. You kind of evaluate each one differently, each token differently. You have a standard of how you approach these different things, and then you then look at and apply that standard to each the nuance of that individual collateral. And so, when you think about liquidity, you want to make sure there's sufficient on-chain liquidity to take care of something. When you're pricing something, you want to make sure that you're getting the truest price of whatever something is and like evaluating what that means. And then on top of that, you also like if a stress test scenario happens, you want to make sure that like any capital you have allocated to something, even in a stress test scenario, is always going to be, user funds on the USDC supply side are always going to be safe. And so we do a lot of back testing on various stress testing scenarios. We track a lot of alerting systems that track so many different things that happen across the market. And like we're always assessing like what happens in these scenarios when liquidity hits this depth. What happens if this much liquidity gets flushed out, say in a liquidation event like last Friday, and we basically prepare our stress testing to handle these various scenarios, and we allocate into a market proportional to the amount of it can actually handle. And that's how we think about these things when we're doing this. Is user supplier funds are always the priority for us, and now we're always trying to keep them safe. And then we approach each different kinds of collateral very differently based on its design and type, then apply nuance to what the collateral is after that. And then we basically always back testing, stress testing, and having automation is always coming to protect our user collateral, user funds, and our vaults from these various collaterals to give them the best yield they're trying to get. And so when you think about like that's just a good application is Morpho, and like how you think about these things and how like us as a curator have to manage these from strategies. And this applies very differently to every single kind of curation help we explore based on the strategy. But it's a good example of how we think about these, and how we apply our deep research and knowledge.
An incredibly well-oiled machine is what
Yeah.
you can probably say. And how did it go? How did you guys fare up on 11th of October? When
Flying colors. We're not just surviving, we are thriving.
That's amazing. We had Upshift on last week, and we discussed just how fantastic, these leading players are in DeFi, and what a great example was set during that event. And, people stood up and lived up to their names. So, yeah, congrats to you guys. On that note of, let's say, ecosystems, Gauntlet vaults are built on Aera, okay, and integrate across protocols like Morpho and Pendle, like you've mentioned. How did these partnerships actually enhance yield and security for depositors?
Yeah. So yeah, we run various vaults on various infras. So Aera is our vault infra that does yield aggregator strategies for something called an alpha. When you look at like a lot of these different infras, they vary very much when it comes to user safety. Some of them, in some ways it's hard to differentiate for an MPC wallet, and then some have much more like differentiation factors to it. With Aera, basically, we kind of designed a strategy that we basically focus on mostly on risk off guardrails that can make sure if an event happens, we can always like design a way to like exit something to make sure like user funds are SAFU. And we basically like if someone uses an Aera Vault info, whether it's us doing the curation or a separate party, we design various roles. What we call a sentinel or a guardian, that's someone who can like manage the strategy, someone who has to prove the strategies, a whitelisting system, and then like various alerting systems you can apply in parameterizations where if something happens in a various like an event like last week where say maybe liquidity really drives down on a certain like token theoretically, there's automatic parameters to actually move out of something. That's how we think about like Aera. And one of our prime projects we built recently that was Gauntlet Alpha USD. And Gauntlet Alpha USD is basically really is designed just a risk off mechanism that's still getting optimized yield, where we always are tracking total allocation to a vault versus like total size. We have total liquidity of the vault, liquidity on a market versus and somewhere maybe exposed to versus like the total liquidity, our exposure versus the total liquidity of something. And they basically set a bunch of parameters to look at if something has to risk off, it immediately risks off. And like that's how we think about Aera and like how we do that kind of a partnership with that vault infra is like we build basically this like kind of product that can build optimized strategies, really prioritizing the user, being able to have shared roles within these like vault infras for various parties, and then very set parameters for them to risk off in the event that something needs to happen. And that's something I think that's a really big differentiating factor of Aera is we don't just allocate, we protect user funds in a risk optimized way. And that's kind of what we're kind of designed there with that product. And we have various different approaches with every single different vault infra and how we operate, whether it's Symbiotic, Morpho, Drift, and any other places we are that maybe I'm not aware of.
Yeah, Suhail is a huge fan of Aera. Suhail's the founder of Portals.
Nice.
And he sings your praises all the time. So yeah, okay, that's great. That's very interesting. And on the partnership side, what kinds of partners or platforms are you actually targeting, and how can builders? Let's talk about builders. How can DeFi builders integrate these vaults into their own products?
Yeah. So like we're always focused on the user base of an audience whenever we design something. Our partners, one of our biggest partners, Morpho, really excited working with them. Symbiotic is another example. Drift, we build Delta neutral strategies with them. And Aera, obviously, we love that team. And like, so kind of like how we build partnerships is it's kind of like what I said. We're very product and user focused first. We find a product in demand for a user base. We optimize the ROI of whether or not we can build it, and then we find the best solution for us to build that for our user base. And so when it comes to doing Morpho, it was an idea of like we've been doing lending risk management for all these DAOs for so long. Curation does feel like the obvious next step for us. And so Morpho was the platform, and in my opinion, still is the platform to onboard the best risk curators to come in and then do what they've been doing for so long on a, on in like a third party way and more of a direct non-custodial manner via this curation model. And so when we think about a partnership, what leverages our expertise? What does our user base want? And then what do we design for a user base that actually meets they're looking for, not just some random vault? And so when we approach partners on the product side, that's what we design it for. After the product is built and designed, we obviously try to find many ways we can to grow distribution, and then find what are the partners that we're building these things for. What other partners can we find in the distribution layer, like Portals, that we think this is actually a good addition to exactly what the user base looks for. And from there, after these products are built, we have these discussions. What does the distribution look like? How do we onboard these distribution models? And then we basically try to scale via that manner as well. And like that's how we kind of think about it. Product user focus first. Find the partners to bring, to bring the right product. Find the distributors to scale that product from there, and to work with us, as much closely as we can to help, build a more synergistic relationship. And that's how we kind of think about these. That's how we think about building a product, finding these partners, and designing everything. Is like that how we go to market with these things. That's what makes Portals a great person to work with.
Oh man, thank you so
Yeah.
much. That's great. So how do you see risk adjusted yield products like Gauntlet then shaping the future of DeFi, especially as institutional capital increasingly enters the space?
Yep. So we've touched on a few parts. I think people want real USD yield. They want to be able to choose their risk profile, and
Mhm.
they want to fully understand what goes on chain. And the first part is real yield. How are we designing real yield for those user bases and these fintechs entering? Because that's what the user base generally cares about. Risk profile, designing a risk profile that meets the yield targets, the risk profile they're looking for. And third, why on chain? This isn't one of those things that are really important now, but at some point, they have to answer to why they did a strategy and why something was done. And we want to make sure we have all the data and info available to present to them and to whoever it needs to be presented, any kind of other clients or institutions trying to onboard into their fintech, they're using our strategies under the hood, to make sure that they can see exactly what's happening and have like the monitoring tools put together for them to actually, make them not just trust but verify what's happening. And that's how we think about onboarding fintechs is this is what they kind of want. And then when we take their feedback and what they're and when we do a diligence and dive into what they're looking into, we try to design something exactly what we think we'll look into, within our product suite. If they want it, they like it, we're all in. And where I see Gauntlet being in this fintech space is not just being another curator. I see us being one of the pillars for what we do to bring on board retail, institutions, fintech on various sectors. Whether it's a massive institution like BlackRock, like the work we're doing with Acred and Apollo, or whether it's a group like Gemini or another different retail, institutional slash retail focused exchange trying to earn or yield products. And like I think that's how we kind of frame ourselves is we just want to be like the main pillar for all these different user bases, designing exact products what they need within our suite, and then make exactly meeting the client's needs, the fintech as well as their clients, which is the retail. And that's how we kind of provide. And there's like an operational, there's a business sense, and there's also a marketing sense. And we want to basically be the go-to place where you never lost your job because you chose Gauntlet because you chose the best. And that's what we want to be to every major fintech institution, and any other vehicle can onboard more users into crypto.
Wow, what a closing answer. Thanks, John. It's been a very, very comprehensive chat. We obviously we keep these short. As you know, I try and talk as little as possible, let our guests do all the talking. So I'm going to close with our final question. It's a bit of a game, and we'll see who comes out on top and bottom, perhaps. But every guest receives this. So the total TVL of DeFi, as per DeFi Llama, right now is 150 billion. What's your prediction for this number at midnight on the 31st of December 2025? New Year's Eve.
Doesn't everyone risk off during Christmas? Like, come on, you got family. But
You've got to be checking DeFi
yeah,
Llama.
yeah,
Come on.
100%. I definitely think we're still in the boom cycle. And I think we're gonna see a lot of big names keep entering crypto. I think like for DeFi TVL, I really think we could see ourselves between 180 and 200 million dollars, $100 billion. By the end of December, as long as we keep having this narrative and more people brought on board. We gotta avoid the events like last Friday, which always spooks out a lot of people. But if we can keep tracking and keep let curators be curators, keep use their funds as safe as we possibly can via these non-custodial vaults, and keep doing everything else. I do think it's possible to maybe, get close to tapping around 200 billion again.
Nice. So what number are you going for? To the nearest billion?
Uh, if I was gambling, 185 billion to 190 billion. If I'm an aggressive and I want a go big or go home, I'd say 195 to 200 is actually viable.
So should I meet in the middle?
Yeah, let's be in the middle.
197.5.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
Jon, you're in.
All right.
Well done. I like it. And I'm optimistic. I'm with you there. So yeah, I think we've just seen a little blip. That's all.
Yeah, agree.
So let's see. Well, that's fantastic. Jon, it's been so good having you. We're very lucky. Thank you so much for all your fantastic knowledge about Gauntlet. We're going to obviously continue supporting every Gauntlet position on the Portals Explorer, which we do already, and all future ones. It's a real pleasure to work with you guys.
Pleasure to work with you guys too.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll have you back 2026 for the new New Year's Eve DeFi TVL challenge.
Let's do it.
All right, Jon. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.